folks, it's Martin. I'm in the studio today and I'm making some sourdough pizza. This is a recipe from Bryan, the author of New World Sourdough. I've got a bunch of toppings. I have some doughs which are ready to be topped. I've got some 00 flour and I've got a nice hot oven, so let's bake some pizza. So while this pizza's baking, I just want to talk for a second about how I have the oven set up here. I have the oven preheated pretty hot. I have it preheated to 550, which is as high as this oven will go. But the thermometer is reading 450, so that is probably closer to about where I am. So the way that I do this is I preheat the stone in the oven very hot, right? And then when I'm ready to bake, I switch the oven over to broil. You have to be very careful when you do this. It's a very easy way to burn everything that you make. But if you're cautious and you're careful in how you handle the oven, it makes really, really good pizza. It's the best way to sort of emulate more of a like Neapolitan style pizza oven. So that's what I'm doing. So yeah, I think it looks pretty good. Color is good, crust is substantial, and it should have this puffy edge crust. The crust should have this open alveolar structure. If I've handled it well, if when shaping I haven't mashed down the edges, and if the dough has good strength and good fermentation, it will open up like that. Also, obviously you need good oven heat too. But it should have that open crumb structure. It's one of the signs that we've done our job well. The amount of flavor between sourdough crust, good tomato sauce, spicy salami, fresh mozzarella, and this little green salsa that I made with just olive oil, salt, lemon, and parsley. It's like it hits all of the buttons, the salt, the acid, the bitter, the sweet. It's hot. I mean, there's a reason that pizza might be the first bread. Flatbreads at least. Oh my gosh. Cheers. Get out there and make some pizza. Okay, so let's go through Bryan's sourdough pizza recipe here. So come on over to the King Arthur website. And as always, if you go in here and you type pizza, you're going to get, 100 different recipes, maybe even more, 103. Jeez. So lots of choices. The recipe of the year last year, this crispy cheesy pan pizza, which is very good, and a certain style. And then Chicago deep dish. This is a really good, this artisan no-knead crust. This is one of my favorites. And grandma pizza. Lots of options, gluten-free, Neapolitan, St. Louis, Detroit. You could probably walk across the country on styles of pizza. So the one that we're looking for, though, is Bryan's Pizza Cubano. And so click on recipes, and there we are. So Bryan's is a sourdough crust. He's calling it Pizza Cubano because it has this Cuban sandwich sort of topping assortment. But we are here primarily for the dough. So let's see what he's got going on here. So it's sourdough and he's not adding any yeast. If you wanted to add a pinch of yeast, you certainly could. But there's really not much need to. Bryan has a levain, which is a liquid levain. You can tell that it's a liquid levain because equal parts flour and water. See this right here? Equal parts flour and water, 200 grams, 200 grams. And a pretty large amount of inoculate here, 100 grams. And if you look over here, you can see that he's saying it might double in 3 to 4 hours. With that much starter, that's, to be expected, right? You're adding that much seed culture. You can also let it go overnight. If you let it go overnight, you're going to have more flavor. But more flavor isn't always better. It's going to get more sour, so you've got to kind of figure out what you want there. And let's go over to Excel for just a second. Only because it allows me to see what the ratios are in the dough. If I don't know what the ratios are, I don't really know what I'm doing as a baker. It's not necessary to make good food, but it helps me know what the dough is going to be before I actually put my hands into it. So this is a mostly white dough. It's got our King Arthur 00 flour, which is really nice, at about 95%. And then Bryan had 5% in whole grain flour. So he had it split between whole wheat and rye. And I'm at the studio and I have a small mill here, so any chance that I get to mill some whole grain flour, I like to do that. And so I swapped out his 50 grams of milled whole wheat and rye, and I swapped in some wheat that I milled from some very special berries that were given to me by Bill Mai, who is a very well-known farmer out in Kansas, growing some white whole wheat for us. So I used some of Bill's special white whole wheat berries. Water is in the low 60s, which is to be expected for a New York style. Salt, 2.5%, maybe a little bit higher than what I'm used to seeing. I'm used to seeing more closer to 2%, but whatever. And then enough sourdough culture to sort of kick things off. So those are the rough ratios. So what do? Build the levain, cover and leave it in a warm place for 3 to 4 hours or until doubled in size. You could do it overnight if you wanted. That's what I did. And then day 2 to make the dough, combine the water and salt, stirring until the salt's completely dissolved. Stir in 400 grams of levain you built. So he has a little bit of extra levain in the formula. Remember that when you go to mix, don't put all of it in there. If you do, don't fret about it. It's no big deal. That extra 100 grams of liquid levain, it's going to soften the dough up slightly, and so that's not, that will have an effect, but it's not catastrophic on any level. So 400 grams of levain, stir to combine, and then slowly add in your flours. And then he gives it a little bit of a rest, and I definitely like that. Like once you have things mixed together, just set it, forget about it. Go walk around the block. Go do something else. Come back. If it's more than 10 minutes, it's okay. If it's half an hour, if it's an hour, it's okay. I like that method. It gives you a very nice dough, which is extensible, and it reduces the amount of time that you need to mix, whether in a machine or by hand. If I made this dough every day or every other day, I definitely would not spend any time kneading it. I would just give bowl folds. But I'm trying to be a good baker, and so I'm following his recipe a little bit, and you'll see me knead it a little bit on the counter. I get bored pretty quick, so I don't knead it that long. After 4 hours, I have a nice active dough. Divided it into 8 pieces, weighing just shy of 250 grams each, somewhere between 225. Here he says 225 to 235, somewhere in there. Wrap the dough balls and let them proof for a little bit, and then put them into the fridge for 24 to 48 hours. I tried both. I like the 24 better. I found that at 48 hours it was getting a little bit too sour for me. I like a hint of acidity with pizza, but I don't like a whole lot. That's my personal preference. You may like a really sour pizza, in which case you should go 48 hours or maybe even 72. And then take the doughs out, let them warm, and be sure that you really preheat the oven. You'll see me talk about how I manage the oven in the video. That's a very good way to do it at home, and you get a nice dark bake, which I like. It's not to everyone's preference. If you want a lighter bake, follow the instructions in the recipe and ignore me, which is probably good advice. I did make Bryan's Pizza Cubano twist on this recipe, and I thought it was good. Pizza is basically really good bread, which can be garnished, as many ways as you can imagine. So I would encourage you to, find your thing, whether it's maybe you want to try barbecue on there, or maybe you want to try, goat cheese and poached pears. I don't know. Get fancy. Get fun. Have some fun. So if you're down here in the volumetric section, you can get your cup measures. I think everybody's heard me talk about my feelings there. So I prefer using a scale, and I would advise you to do the same. So Bryan Ford's New York style sourdough pizza cubano, very flavorful. I encourage you to make some pizza. You know, pizza's been around a long time. Flatbreads, generally speaking, are probably the oldest breads that we humans have been making. In fact, we've been making them for so long that the existence of flatbreads predates the cultivation of grain. So thousands of years before we were actually cultivating grain in what they think was probably the Fertile Crescent, there is evidence, archaeological evidence, that we were actually foraging grains and then grinding them and making them into flatbreads and cooking them directly on coals long before we were actually growing grain. So pizza is not new. We love it. We've loved it for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. I encourage you to get out there and make some. So enjoy.